Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's go. About 15 years ago, I used to work in the highly regulated area of inbound mortgage sales in the UK. Our calls were monitored for compliance, and multiple failed calls led to action plans being put in place to get you back on track. Well, I had a terrible start to the year, and failed 3 calls in a row. The usual follow-up and support didn't happen, and I turned things around and passed the next 4 months of calls with no action plan needed. In month 4, I get called into a meeting to discuss my need for an action plan. I was confused, as it had been so long since I had failed a call. I was referred back to the call from the start of the year. I mentioned that I felt that the action plan was unwarranted, as I had turned this around myself even without the support, and putting me on an action plan now was definitely closing the stable door after the horse had bolted. I was told that this was non-negotiable. Okay, fair enough. The action plan is drawn up and there is a section for my comments. I state the dates of my failed calls, the record since the last failed calls, and my disappointment that the support was not offered at the time of need. I was told I wasn't allowed to record this on the performance plan. What they didn't realize at the time is how petty I am, so I researched the HR handbook, printed out the sections stating implicitly I was allowed to put any info I wanted recognizing this in this section. I updated the performance plan to state I had been told I couldn't record my objections to the manager who told me that, and added the HR handbook section for good measure. Well, it turns out we were due for an inspection, and not intervening when there is a record of failed calls was a big issue. My diverting the lack of support back to management would not look good. They would not sign off my plan as it stood, and I would not back down either. The result was I was not allowed to do my job. I was already job searching elsewhere, but I managed to spend 3 months being paid to job search and be available for AdGov tasks. This mostly ended up with me playing Mario Kart in the break room until busy work could be found elsewhere. When I eventually gave my notice, I was immediately put on a month's paid leave to get me out as soon as they could. My mom is a bit of a narcissist. At first, she appears to be perfectly normal until you get to know or live with her. This is why she can't seem to keep any friends or even her own children in contact with her. I have gone no contact as of 2023. After having enough of living with her entitlement and narcissism, I moved out between 19 and 20 years old, which is a bit uncommon since rent has skyrocketed in the area. I managed how I could with a roommate who had a well-paying job, and my own job. She paid for none of my living expenses. We did everything on our own. Despite that, she always tried to control every aspect of my life. And her continuing to do that is why I chose to go no contact. I only realized that was an option through therapy and a bunch of supportive friends a few years later. Before that time, I was still listening to her, and she was able to guilt me into a lot of things I didn't want. When I moved out, I was striving to decorate my new apartment in any way I saw fit. I had so many ideas. I immediately hung up all the posters I had in my room in the hallway. The walls had a few cracks, and I wanted to cover them. We used red and blue thumbtacks. We didn't have a kitchen table yet, but we never ate at the table anyway. I wanted something either really small so that it wouldn't take up space or something multifunctional. We ended up looking for a pool table with a solid cover over the top, so that we could put a vinyl tablecloth over it to protect it from stains. My dad loved the idea. My mom, not so much. She hated how I decorated my new apartment. She claimed it looked childish with my fairy lights across the ceiling. Dad thought it looked like a bachelor pad, and had no issue with it. Gotta love Dad. She kept making comments about how I needed to take down the posters and get paintings I didn't like or need. She kept telling me I needed to paint something I paint, and have it framed for the hallway. Every single time I visited or came home for more of my things, it was a similar conversation each time about how she thought my apartment was ugly, how she would have never done it that way, how she needed to come in and fix it, and how no adult would ever choose to have it like that. She wanted me to entirely redecorate my entire apartment, which would have cost hundreds of dollars to hire a painter or buy stuff I didn't need from Goodwill. I kept trying to gently tell her that I liked how my apartment looked, and that I was an adult who could make their own choices. We hadn't moved all of my things inside the apartment yet. It was really horrible how many mean comments she was making on how I had no taste, how I needed to take everything down and start over, and how her house looked so much better. For the most part, I had ignored it. I was very much used to her hating everything about what I did. Then she stopped making those comments and started to take me to yard sales in hopes of finding something I needed. It was a plot of her own, of course. She found a kitchen table and chairs that she fell in love with. I didn't want them. I was looking for a pool table. She bought them all, and when Dad told her she wasn't getting rid of his kitchen table, she gifted them to me. I was raised to always accept gifts she gave me, or she would raise absolute heck. She would make it her mission to make me feel guilty, and like the worst person in the world if I didn't appear to like her gifts. There have been times she returned some of my Christmas presents because I didn't have the correct reaction to them. If I didn't have a huge smile on my face and enthusiastically thanked her for what she had gotten me, it would disappear from my present pile, and I'd never see it again. There were other times she told my sibling to steal it from me, and I would never get the chance to wear the shirt, play with the toy, etc., just because I didn't act eternally grateful or put on a huge show of gratitude to make her have any semblance of self-esteem. She thought she was entitled to control my reaction to her giving me a gift. Other times, she thought she was entitled to other people's gifts and would steal mine, my dad's or my siblings' presents because she thought she looked better in them, or just simply wanted them. I was never allowed to own a console because she believed I would spend less time with her. In reality, I found other ways to not spend time with her that weren't technology. She just didn't want to give me something I'd use to ignore her with. I ended up saving every piece of birthday money to buy myself a laptop at 16, with no help from her, because she would often tell people at my birthday parties not to gift me money, claiming I'd spend it all. When each person approached me about what I wanted for my birthday and teased me about not being good with money, I'd tell them my plans and show them my stash of money I'd saved thus far. Of course, she took to stealing my money on occasion because she didn't want me to have independence or a way to ignore her. I was wanting to save up for a car or a computer, something I'd need when I was an adult. I would keep a record of my money in a little notebook, which detailed the number of bills, coins, and amounts, which is how I found out she was stealing my money. Dad made her feel so bad, she stopped doing it. Dad often put a stop to things like that, but he couldn't mediate everything due to working all the time. This is just a few reasons why I had to be very careful of the gifts she gave me, and the entire reason I begrudgingly accepted the gift of the kitchen table. Otherwise, she'd tell the entire extended family that I was on drugs, and that I needed to come back home in an attempt to get me in a place where she could control me. That kitchen table ended up being very abused when I adopted a stray cat who didn't know where the litter box was. She figured it out after peeing on the table a few times. I was never more proud. The table and chairs ended up in the dumpster when I moved. Most of the chairs had broken because of the climate and wood not being compatible with each other. As for the posters, I did not replace them with paintings. They stayed where I put them until I moved to another state. The fairy lights did not last because she would come visit and secretly cut them with scissors. I gave up on replacing them. I didn't realize she was doing it until years later when she admitted to it. I have never felt more free after buying my own home and decorating it with posters, multicolored thumbtacks, and Christmas lights bought on sale. They really aid the kids in finding the bathroom in the dark, and the teens love the Star Wars posters. I'm planning on hanging up some different ones soon. We had just disembarked from a 7-day Caribbean cruise, and the return drive from Florida to Tennessee seemed like the final hurdle before we could sink into the comfort of our home. With 2 hours left on our journey, the hunger pangs were becoming unbearable. So we made a pit stop at Wendy's for a quick dinner. Little did we know this stop would be more eventful than our entire cruise. As we settled into the booth, exhausted but content, the kids started buzzing with excitement about the trip, recounting every little detail to each other. My husband Tom and I shared a weary smile, glad to be almost home. Our food was taking a bit longer than expected, but it wasn't a big deal. We'd survived 7 days at sea with 3 kids. Waiting a few extra minutes for burgers was a walk in the park. Just as I was about to comment on how much more comfortable solid ground felt, the door to the Wendy's flew open with a loud bang. In walked a man, probably in his late 30s, with a furious expression plastered on his face. His eyes darted around the restaurant until they landed on the counter. "Hey, you screwed up my order," he bellowed, waving a crumpled Wendy's bag in the air. Everyone in the restaurant fell silent, all eyes turning to the spectacle unfolding before us. Tom nudged me, whispering, "This should be interesting." The manager, a calm and composed woman, stepped forward. "Sir, what seems to be the problem? You made 2 of my sandwiches wrong," he shouted, slamming the bag on the counter. "I ordered 2 junior bacon cheeseburgers, and you gave me 2 junior cheeseburgers." She didn't flinch. "Let me check your order." She tapped a few buttons on the register and pulled up the transaction. "According to the receipt, you ordered 2 junior cheeseburgers." The man's face turned redder. "No, my wife ordered 2 junior bacon cheeseburgers. You screwed it up." The manager maintained her composure. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but the order was placed as 2 junior cheeseburgers. If you'd like the junior bacon cheeseburgers, it'll be $2.33 each." This seemed to be the last straw for the man. He exploded, grabbing the burgers and hurling them at a young employee behind the counter. "I want my damn burgers right," the room collectively gasped. The young employee, a teenager, looked stunned, remnants of ketchup and lettuce clinging to his uniform. The manager stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "Sir, you need to calm down. That's a child you just threw food at, and we do not tolerate that behavior here." At this point, my 5-year-old daughter, Emily, decided it was her moment to shine. With all the authority a kindergartner could muster, she loudly proclaimed, "We don't throw food at anyone." I wanted to molt into the floor. "Shish, Emily," I whispered, hoping to avoid drawing any more attention to our family. But the damage was done. The angry man turned his glare toward us. "You should teach your kid to mind her own business," he snapped. Tom tensed beside me, ready to defend our daughter, but the manager intervened before things could escalate further. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to leave. I will refund your money, but you cannot behave like this." The man demanded his refund, muttering curses under his breath. The manager swiftly processed it and handed him his money. Without another word, he stormed out, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Our food arrived moments later, and the kids dug in. Seemingly unfazed by the dramatic turn of events, Tom and I exchanged a look, a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Did that really just happen?" I asked, taking a bite of my burger. "Over 2 burgers," Tom said, shaking his head. "Unbelievable." As we finished our meal and got back on the road, Emily couldn't stop talking about the mean man at Wendy's. It became a part of the vacation story, a bizarre anecdote we would recount to friends and family. Thinking back, I couldn't help but wonder about the man and what had led him to explode over something so trivial. Was it really about the burgers, or was it the culmination of a bad day, a bad week, or even a bad year? I guess we all have moments where the smallest thing can be the final straw, but it was a stark reminder to always strive for patience and kindness, no matter how tough things get. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the kids were fast asleep, and Tom and I were exhausted but relieved. Home at last, we carried the kids inside and tucked them into their beds. As I crawled into my own bed, I reflected on the day, grateful for my family and the bizarre experiences that make life unpredictable and memorable. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. Are you ready for the most bizarre story you will ever hear today? Buckle up and get ready. I was walking down the street, minding my own business, when I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me, but can you help me carry my shopping bags?" I turned around and saw a woman, probably in her late 40s, with a pile of bags next to her. Sure, I said, and picked up a couple of bags. As I lifted them, I noticed how heavy they were. Wow, what do you have in here? Just some essentials, the woman said with a smirk. You know how it is. We walked for a few minutes in silence, the woman occasionally thanking me for my help. Suddenly she stopped in front of a huge mansion. This is my house, she said proudly. Wow, it's really impressive, I said, admiring the marble pillars and the manicured lawn. I know, right? The woman said with a smug smile. I've worked hard to get where I am, and now that I have everything I want, nobody is going to take it away from me. I didn't understand what she meant, but I didn't ask. We entered the house, and the woman led me to a room full of expensive furniture and artwork. Put the bags there, she said, pointing to a corner. I did as she asked, and then turned to leave. Thank you for your help, I said. Oh no, you're not going anywhere, the woman said, grabbing my arm. I need you to help me with something else. What do you mean? I asked, trying to free myself from her grip. I need you to help me move this couch, she said, pointing to a huge leather sofa in the middle of the room. I'm sorry, but I have to go, I said, feeling a bit uncomfortable. You're not going anywhere until you help me, the woman said, her grip tightening. I tried to pull away, but she was surprisingly strong. Let me go, I said, feeling scared. Not until you do what I say, the woman said, her eyes flashing with anger. I didn't know what to do. I was alone in a room with an angry woman who was much stronger than me. And then, I remembered something my grandmother used to say. If you can't beat them, join them. Okay, I'll help you, I said, trying to sound confident. That's more like it, the woman said, finally releasing my arm. We spent the next hour moving furniture around, with the woman barking orders and making sarcastic comments. You call yourself a man, she said, as I struggled to lift a heavy table. My daughter could do this better than you, and she's only 10. I tried to keep my cool, but it wasn't easy. I'm doing the best I can, I said, gritting my teeth. You're not doing enough, the woman said, getting angrier by the minute. I should have hired someone stronger than you. I'm sorry if I'm not strong enough for you, I said, feeling a bit hurt. You're sorry? You should be ashamed of yourself. You're a disgrace to your gender. That was the last straw. I had enough of her insults and her entitled attitude. You know what? I don't have to put up with this, I said, grabbing my jacket. Where do you think you're going? The woman said, blocking my way. I'm leaving, I said, pushing her aside. You're not leaving until I say so, the woman said, trying to grab me again. But this time I was ready for her. I stepped back, and she stumbled forward, her arms flailing. She landed on the couch with a thud, and I took the opportunity to run to the door. But just as I was about to open it, the woman grabbed my ankle. I fell to the ground, hitting my head on the marble floor. The next thing I knew, the woman was standing over me, holding a vase in her hand. You're not leaving, she said, her voice low and menacing. I tried to crawl away, but she hit me on the head with the vase. I felt a sharp pain, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room, with a bandage around my head. My parents were sitting next to me, looking worried. What happened? I asked, my voice weak. You were attacked, my mother said, tears in her eyes. Someone found you unconscious in a mansion. That woman who asked you to help her, my father said, his voice angry. She's been arrested. Apparently, she's been doing this to other people as well. I closed my eyes, feeling relieved and grateful to be alive. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel angry at the entitled woman who had almost killed me. And the first thing I wanted to do is to share the story with you guys. I'll update you with everything. This happened yesterday when I was working on Christmas Eve at my retail job. I had already worked a full shift and was staying a little bit longer since someone had not called or shown up. I had about 2 hours left before I could go home when an entitled mother showed up in my line. This particular entitled mother is infamous at our store, and everyone tries to avoid her as much as possible. She is a crusading type of mom who makes sure you know exactly what she stands for, because she is going to go out of her way to tell you. Heaven help you if you are one hair out of line when it comes to her ideals. I guess today, her cause was mental health. Anyway, she finally gets up to me, and of course, she has a million different questions about various items that I just do not have the answers to. She then wants to do price matching on about 80% of her items, and for the other 20%, she wants to know the prices. As if that were not bad enough, she has her daughter with her, and wants her daughter to pay separately from her. I waste about 5 to 10 minutes dealing with her and her nonsense, while the other people in line start to yell at me to hurry up. I finally get her and her daughter through the line without too many issues. Just when I think I am done with her, I make the mistake of saying, "Happy Holidays," as I hand her the bags. I start ringing out the next customer and notice she is still skulking about. About halfway through ringing up the next person in line, the entitled mother comes behind the counter and stands right next to me to have a conversation. Entitled mother: "Hi, sorry. I don't mean to bother you, and I know you didn't mean anything by it, but you really shouldn't be saying Happy Holidays. There are people with depression and other conditions that you could trigger with language like that since they feel like they have to be happy." Me: "Okay, can you please step away from my area here?" I was super irritated, and my tone definitely reflected that. Entitled mother: "You can drop the attitude, honey. You're the one out here endangering people by saying things like that. And right now you're being very rude." Me: "Okay, please step back." At this point, the customer I had been ringing up was getting angry and started yelling at me for getting distracted, which was fair. I go back to ringing her out, with the entitled mother deciding to step even closer, standing less than an inch away from me, and continuing to try to have my undivided attention. I had finally had enough. Me: "Stand the heck back." Things proceeded to devolve from there. Her daughter starts crying, like that obnoxiously loud kind of crying. The entitled mother is yelling, my new customer is yelling that she's not moving through the line, and the whole thing is a mess. Security eventually comes and gets the entitled mother away from me, and a few minutes after that, my manager pulls me off the floor and someone else takes my place at the register. To make a long story short, my manager wants me to apologize to the entitled mother. I told him I wouldn't, and he ended up sending me home about an hour early as a result. I don't know if I'm fired or not, but so far I'm still on the schedule for tomorrow. So hopefully, the worst I have waiting for me when I come in is a stern talking to update. I didn't get fired. I got written up, told my behavior was unacceptable, and informed that if it happens again, I'm fired, etc. I'm getting transferred to a new department at the store, and starting my new training in that section today. My mother got pregnant at 17 while my father was 20. They were not a couple, and he had a girlfriend at the time, so when the news came out, things got chaotic. From what I was told, my father was a womanizer who cheated on his girlfriend multiple times, so he wanted nothing to do with my mother. She talked to his mother and sisters about the pregnancy and her wanting a relationship with him, but he wasn't the type to listen to people telling him what to do. He distanced himself from the situation and continued his relationship with his girlfriend. Before getting pregnant, my mother was already a problem for her parents because she lived by her own rules, was very disrespectful, had a habit of lying, sneaking out of the house to party, and dropped out of school at 16. She always had a strange relationship with her brother, who was 2 years younger, because she thought he received better treatment from their parents. When she was 7 months pregnant, my grandparents decided to move to a bigger city against her wishes because they thought her relationship with my father was unhealthy. They hoped to help her raise me while she went back to school. My grandmother was the breadwinner, and my uncle got a job at 15 to help with the bills, while my grandfather stayed at home, and my mother split her time between school and work. This situation lasted for a couple of years until my mother became obsessed with another guy, decided to marry him, and took me to live with them when I was 2. Her husband, who was 2 years younger than her, worked at his father's company, and my mother stayed at home. They had a party all the time lifestyle, and I was always with them on road trips, parties, pubs, and barbecues with friends. When I was 4, my sister was born, and with the new baby, they couldn't party together daily, as they did before. That's when my stepfather started to go out without my mother, and when he came back home very drunk, they argued a lot, had screaming matches, and after some years of this dynamic, he eventually started to hit her. My mother's relationship with my stepfather's parents was rocky. They judged her for being a young mom, and considered her a gold digger. When she asked for their help because of his alcoholism and the domestic violence, they helped but blamed her, and the pressure she put on him to be a breadwinner while being so young. My mother and stepfather tried to work things out for a while, but eventually, his addiction won, and they divorced when I was 7. My mother, my sister, and I went to live with my maternal grandparents. One thing I remember about my mother and stepfather's marriage was the constant tension in his parents' house. My mother and stepfather had me calling him Dad since I was 3, so I used to call everyone Grandpa, Grandma, Uncle, and Auntie. Everyone was polite but not warm. When my sister was born, everyone treated her so well. She was everyone's favorite, always receiving kisses, hugs, and compliments. I didn't understand why people didn't treat me the same. My mother also treated my sister better. I always had the feeling that my mother didn't like me because she almost never hugged me or talked to me, ignored me when I tried to show affection, and was always cold towards me. And my stepfather always seemed like he didn't want to be a father or husband, always doing reckless things to feel alive, like speeding his car while drunk or sitting at the window with his legs out in our apartment on the 29th floor. A few months after their divorce, my mother took me on a trip to the mall, and as we ate at McDonald's, she told me my stepfather was not my father, and that I actually had another dad. She then introduced me to my biological father, who had a quick chat with me, bought me a doll, and then we went home. It was a weird day. A few months passed, and I saw him again at a doctor appointment, which was, in fact, a DNA test. He was with his wife, as he was now married to his girlfriend from when he was younger, and they didn't speak to me or my mother at all. The test came back positive, and I officially had my biological father's last name added to mine, and he started to pay child support. I never saw him again after the day we had the test done. Money was tight in our house because my grandmother and uncle worked but were paid minimum wage. My grandfather worked as a handyman and carpenter, so it was challenging to feed everyone, pay rent, utilities, and buy clothes, etc. My mother received child support from my biological father and stepfather's family, but always claimed she had no money. My stepfather was a wreck and completely out of control, and his family hated paying child support. After a few months, my stepfather's parents offered to raise my little sister since they were wealthy and could provide for her, and enroll her in good schools, etc. I remember being so confused because I didn't want to be separated from my sister, and I wanted to live with Grandma too, but she was not my grandma. My mother accepted the offer and started to live by her own rules again, working and barely being home during her free time. After my sister went to live with her grandparents, I became a lonely kid. She would come to our home every other week for the first year. But then her grandparents started to bring her less and less to see us, and my mother didn't care enough to visit her at their house either. Sometimes she would send me to spend time at their house, and it was always weird because people were polite but not warm. I felt so much resentment because my sister lived a better life than mine, with toys, clothes, trips, private school, language classes, etc., while I was in public school and mostly alone at home watching TV and playing with old or donated toys. We had two completely different lives, but one thing in common was that our mother wasn't present in either of them. Ever since her divorce, my mother became colder and more distant. She worked all day and partied all night, from Monday to Monday, almost always sleeping at her friend's house, to avoid going home and listening to her parents lecture her about not taking care of her kids. She had a terrible relationship with her parents, and the three of them would always fight about money and responsibilities. When I was 8, I asked her why she had kids if she didn't like kids. She told me she wanted to have an abortion when she was pregnant with me, and my biological father rejected her. But her parents didn't consent, and that's why she hated them. My grandparents didn't have the habit of saying, "I love you," but they showed me love by taking care of me with kindness and respect. I also learned a lot from my uncle, who loved to spend time with me when he was home from work. I used to pray every night asking God that my grandparents reveal that they were my real parents, and my mother was just a mean sister. I remember sometimes not having proper shoes or clothes to go to school, and my grandmother would buy them for me even if she didn't have the extra money. But in her bedroom, my mother had a nice big collection of high heels and high-end party clothes. When I was 9, my mother got together with her second husband, who was 15 years older than her. He had 2 daughters from his first marriage, who were 12 and 14 at the time, and lived with their mom. I never confirmed this, but it always seemed like they had some kind of agreement that he would not raise someone else's kid. He used to pretend I didn't exist and ignored me, wouldn't talk to me, or acknowledge me if I was in the same room. When I was 11, my mom became pregnant with my sister and went to live with him. My grandmother asked her to take me, but she talked to me in private and asked me to tell my grandparents that I didn't want to go with her because she wanted to start a new family. 1 year and 5 months after my sister was born, she gave birth to my brother. When my brother was 1 and my sister was 2, my stepfather lost his job, and the 4 of them went to live with us at my grandparents' house. My mother had to work, and I was used as a nanny for the babies. I didn't have a normal life for a 13-year-old, and missed birthday parties and school events because I was taking care of 2 babies at home. My sister rarely came to our house, but when she did, my mother showered her with love. I resented her so much that I stopped going to her grandparents' house to see her. At the same time, I was basically raising my little brother and sister, and my mother would berate me for everything. She would yell at me that I was too fat, that I was ugly because of acne, that my hair was weird, and that everything about me was bad because I had bad blood. She hated that my grandparents treated me well and liked me. If I asked to go out to study with friends, she would guilt-trip me, saying the kids needed me and liked to be with me. She would go out with my stepfather almost every night, and I was the one making the kids dinner, giving them baths, and putting them to sleep. As my grandmother didn't want to raise 2 more grandkids, my stepfather didn't have a new job, but he would spend the day out working. Later, we discovered he was addicted to gambling and worked as a poker player for his wealthy friends. As the years passed, I became an angry teenager because I felt misunderstood, lonely, and used. I started to yell back at my mother when she yelled at me, and our home became a place of turmoil. My uncle moved out when he was 23 and had a job, and he didn't like my stepfather at all. He never disrespected him but would not speak to him either. My mother, stepfather, grandmother, and grandfather argued all the time, and I had the feeling that I would lose my mind if I stayed home. So I focused on my studies and was a top student to try to get into a good college and get out of there. My mother hated that my grandparents gave me money for clothes or school supplies. She didn't buy me anything herself, and she hated that they did. She resented the relationship I had with my grandparents and would always tell me they only did this because I was not their daughter. My mother and stepfather worked during the day and left early in the morning to get the kids to school and go to work. I had to cook for everyone and clean the house, and my stepfather would complain if he thought the house was not clean enough. One thing my mother and stepfather loved to do was traveling together and taking the kids with them. So every other month, they took 1 or 2 weeks off to go on a road trip, leaving me with my grandparents. She would mock me, saying I couldn't go with them because I was fat and would make them spend too much on food. So, in my first year of high school, I found a job at a convenience store in a gas station that opened at night. So I worked from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. from Monday to Friday. I wanted to save money for my expenses, and I knew it was dangerous, but I didn't care. I was assaulted 3 times, and in one of those robberies, I almost got shot. I decided I would work as much as possible during my high school years, and save money to get out of that house. I did it all in secret, never told my mother but told my grandparents. My grandfather said it was a good idea to save some money for the future. When I finished high school, I passed the college entrance exam for a public university and moved to the capital. I never looked back and never wanted to come home again. My grandmother died when I was 18, and my uncle took my grandfather to live with him. My mom, stepfather, and 2 kids moved to a small house in the suburbs, and my biological father's family reached out, wanting me to go live with them. I spent 1 year there, but I was so confused because I didn't belong in that house, and felt like my stepmom only accepted me because she had no other option. It was too weird living with them because I felt so much hate from them. But I wanted to know them, and felt like I needed their approval. I went back to the capital, got a job in the university library, and was paying for my expenses. I worked from 6 p.m. to midnight, and then went to a class from 7 a.m. to noon. Life was hectic but so much better. In the years that followed, I only kept in touch with my siblings and met my stepfather only at birthday parties. He ignored me at those events as if I was a stranger. My mother and I used to have phone calls every other week, and she would always complain about me not wanting to visit her, but she would never visit me either. I felt abandoned by my family and worked hard to be independent. My grandparents did the best they could to raise me and teach me values and respect. I felt loved by them, but my relationship with my mother never recovered. She would always make rude comments and talk about how I had a bad personality. She never apologized for her behavior, never admitted she treated me badly, and would deny everything when I tried to talk to her about it. When I started dating and had boyfriends, she never met any of them. She always said they would never want to date me if they knew who I was, so she didn't want to embarrass me. I graduated, got a good job, moved to my own apartment, and started therapy. I learned a lot about myself, and therapy helped me understand that I had to let go of the past and focus on my own happiness. I met a wonderful guy. We dated for 5 years, and then we married. I didn't invite my mother to the wedding because I knew she would make everything about her. I only invited my siblings and my grandfather. My husband and I moved to another city, and I've been living my best life ever since. My siblings and I have a good relationship, and they are all aware of how our mother was. I know I did my best to create a good life for myself, and I am proud of the person I became despite everything. My relationship with my mother is almost non-existent, and I am at peace with that. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.